First things first, Greg, how are you?
Doing great, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
Good.
So before we get into the record, I'd like to jump back to the beginning. And I believe your parents had quite a record collection.
They do. Well, yeah, I grew up just listening to like all the older music like Beach Boys or like Stephen Stills or Crosby, Stills and Nash. Yeah, there's definitely like a record on at all times in my house.
Okay.
But yeah, my dad has great taste in music and he passed that along. So my brother and I just grew up listening to that kind of stuff, and that was a big influence on me for sure.
And you mentioned the Beatles, the Beach Boys. As a young kid, what attracted you to these bands that aren't necessarily listened to by a lot of your peers?
Yeah, I just liked that sound, and maybe it was because it reminded me of like community, because I grew up in the house and that music was always playing, so it reminded me of more of a familiar family sound. So yeah, I think I was just more attracted to that noise, to like acoustic type music, because when I grew up, it was like the hottest music was like Britney Spears and that kind of thing. So it was a big departure to be able to listen to like the Beatles and the Beach Boys, or I mean, those are very basic examples, but that type of music.
And well, your brother's here as well. But so were there instruments lying around the house? Did you just pick up a guitar, or did you actively pursue instruments and playing music?
Yeah, so there's always a piano around my house, and we started off playing piano, but like quickly quit that. We didn't really like piano that much, but my dad bought a guitar eventually when we were like 9 years old, and my brother started playing first, and then I followed quickly after that. Yeah. And
then, am I right in saying you started making music together?
Yeah, right away. I mean, we would jam together all the time. Just someone would play some chords, someone would solo, and then that turned into a band eventually by high school and college. Yeah, and ever since then we've been making music together.
At this point around high school, did you start writing your own songs, or was it still kind of figuring out where to go?
Started writing my own songs probably early high school. Decided that I really liked songwriting and wanted to explore that more. In the band, it was more of a group effort, but I started really getting attracted to just writing music on my own. So I just started doing that early high school, and then started just getting better at that and started trying different styles, but I eventually fell into this like folk Americana sound that I play today.
What were you looking for in songwriting? Was it more focused on the words? Was it just creating something out of nothing?
Yeah, I think I wasn't very good at writing lyrics for a while. I didn't think. So I would focus on music. I'd write a lot of instrumental pieces until like later in high school, and I'd start putting words to it, and I started like reading a lot of poetry and paying attention to people's lyrics, focusing more on that, and then trying to find out how to do that and figure my way through putting poems that I would start to write into song. Yeah.
Who were some of because you mentioned kind of the Americana tradition that you fell into, which has some great lyricists. So who are some of the people that you kind of looked or admired to in terms of what they had to say?
I would listen to Stephen Stills and Crosby, Stills and Nash for sure. Like Joni Mitchell, the Beatles for sure. I just got attracted to what they would have to say. They would write songs from like very mundane topics to political topics, and this album coming out, I have some political songs, and I think I drew off of that. Drew off of like the 60s sound and the 70s sound when there was a lot of unrest in the country, and I started getting attracted to that kind of thing, as telling what's going on in your country or in your world through your song.
It's interesting that you say that, because this is just my opinion, but I see a lot of parallels with the 60s and today in terms of the political climate, but also the music that comes out of it. So is it almost unavoidable? It might not be the right word, but inevitable that part of what happens around you kind of seeps into to the music?
I think so, and just going off of that, growing up, I was very into art and literature, and eventually studied art history. Okay. So a big part of art to me is just how it represents what's going on around you, or in the world, or in your city, or in your family, or but specifically what's going on in that time period of when you're living. And that struck me as important for, I think art should always convey what's going on around you, and specifically political and socially and economically and all that stuff. So
when you started forming the idea of an album, of this album and Friends, where did you start? Was it with the kind of this framework and then writing from there, or did the songs just come in and you formed an album out of that?
The songs just came, and then I decided to throw them all together. I've been writing music for so long, and I always write like song by song normally, but this album, I wanted to have more of a theme with it rather than just like releasing singles. So yeah, I kind of came to the theme of like a more political album, at least some of the songs. And it was because I wrote it in 2016, and there's a lot of things happening, and a lot of things that would change the course of our country, or yeah, a lot of things that were going to have big impact on the next few years to come, and I thought it was important to write about that.
In that sense, because they've been written a while ago, do you have the same emotional connection to them, or the same interpretation of them as when you wrote them now?
I mean, it's funny, because a lot of the songs I wrote as like a what if, like if this happens, like what if this happens and all these terrible things that could come from it. But now we're kind of living in that world. So it's, yeah, it's definitely changed. Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of the things I was saying and writing about have come to take place, and it's interesting. Rather than the songs being like, what if this happens, it's like I'm singing about what's going on now.
Is there one song in particular that kind of stuck out for you, or is it the entire thing?
Yeah, well, so my one song, Mindless Age, is basically like, it's a song about like a dystopian future, a dystopian society, and like if Donald Trump was elected, what would happen? And like, it's like if all my pictures had been broken, all my memories wiped away. It's like kind of like 1984. Like you have no creative freedom or liberties. So I was writing about that, and then just like I feel like each day goes by and our society is getting a little closer and closer to that. So yeah, that one for me has kind of been the most like things that I saw in the future as a what if have kind of come to be, and it's interesting to look at those lyrics again and feel them more rather than like a story. It's kind of more of a reality.
Right.